me take it out.
Now, do you believe that Sarah Boone does have some narcissistic traits?
I do. As she described being a straight-A student, she reiterated about her abilities, and I felt that that was evidence that she had low self-esteem and her coping mechanism.
Yes, to do impression management, either depending on the outcome. So if there's punitive sanctions, they may lie to make themselves look worse, or as a result, if they're in other settings, like divorce settings, they may lie to make themselves look better. So there's always some impression management you have to kind of look through in your evaluation.
Are you
Nope,
familiar
didn't
with
match.
the narcissistic personality disorder?
Yes, sir, of course.
Is that something recognized in the DSM-5 TR?
Yes, sir.
He was the one that had all the bruising. Sarah had none. Okay, she had bruising on her hand from holding the bat because she was beating him so hard with it.
She's not aware she's inconveniencing others.
Were there any indications in the photographs of injuries on her consistent with being dragged down the stairs of carpet?
Nope.
I didn't see inside her scalp.
Mr. Owens, if you can believe him, clinical psychologist Dr. Brannon's going to be testifying today. He was the one that was the expert in the Marsha Thompson case, another woman who was accused of murdering her husband. However, the jury acquitted her. I'm not very familiar with that case, but when I heard that she shot him in the back a couple times, I don't know. They assumed it was self-defense. The jury thought it was self-defense. So we're also going to hear from law enforcement who came up to the scene when Sarah Boone and George were fighting in the past. I think they mentioned there were about like 5 incidents. So we might see some new body cam footages. We've seen some already in the past, and there's some on my channel. But there are body cam footages. There's going to be some 911 calls, some photos, videos, I guess, of Sarah and George. Maybe we'll see some injuries. But I mean, honestly, when we heard from her side of the story about all the injuries between her and George, like, yes, her injuries look really fucking bad. But because she's lied so much, and we've known she's lied about the night of the murder, it's just hard for me to take her word for it for everything. Like, I'm sure there's some truths woven in there, but to completely believe her 100% when she's already found herself to be not a credible person, to me, I'm like, I don't know, man. We're just getting a lot of new convenient truths that are coming out in the woodworks. Especially the one about the neighbors. That was really funny. You know, Sarah Boone claims to have really, not good memory of what happened that night. But however, she was able to be very, very clear about certain things, like what they did that day, how their day was structured, how she felt when George bought more alcohol, how detailed it was with the incident with when she was shaking the suitcase and she thought she was in fear of her life. Things were very detailed. But when Mr. J asked her about other stuff that was not, like I said, in her script, in my opinion, she was like, oh, I don't know. Do you remember that you took this picture? Oh, I don't know. Okay, so you seem to have a memory issues. He didn't say that, but I was thinking like Juan Martinez. But she was definitely having some memory issues on the stand. Selective memory issues, I would say, because she knows that there are questions that she can't dodge. So she would just say, I don't know. However, I don't know. We're just hearing new things that we haven't heard before. And it's just a little too convenient, in my opinion. Oh, I also want to point out, yesterday when I was ending the video and I was doing the recap on stream, I think I lost my trail of thought. I was trying to say that Owens said that Sarah Boone was triggered because she said that she heard George saying, oh, I can't breathe. Please let me out. I can't breathe. And then because of that triggered her. And then she remembered all those times that George would choke her out, right? And she couldn't breathe. She was being strangled. However, on the witness stand, Sarah said that, after they're having their fun, laughing and everything, she decides to take that moment to talk to George. And then George was getting angry. And then when George was sticking his fingers out, that was when she was grabbing the bat and she's like, please stop doing this. Please stop doing this to me. Which I'm like, what do you mean, please stop doing this to me? He's trying to get out of the suitcase. What do you think? And she's like, no, please stop doing this to me. I'm just saying that we're hearing some different stories here. And I do want to point this out, that Owens basically testified for Sarah yesterday. I'm surprised there's no objection. You know, the attorney is not the one who's testifying here. It's Sarah Boone. But I felt like Owen was like testifying for her, giving her like super leading questions, or just literally just straight up just testifying for her. I think Owens did a good job at trying to save his client multiple times. Also, when Sarah Boone was struggling to zip that suitcase, she was struggling to zip that suitcase. Imagine if you were George on the other side. How could you unzip yourself? And it was that hard to get in and out of. So she was struggling to zip it. And of course, Owen steps in and helps her. I'm like, hello, can we get some objections here? Are they allowed to just have Mr. Owens do all those things for Sarah? Oh, gosh. So, I don't know. I don't know if there is... Our first two witnesses for Sarah Boone are going to be two officers that responded to the incidents of Sarah Boone and George Torres. I believe there are two separate one, because one resulted in the arrest of Sarah Boone for sure, and then the other one, the arrest of George. Actually, I think George got arrested, and maybe both of them, possibly.
July the 25th of 2018, how were you employed at that time?
I was a full-time deputy sheriff for the agency.
While having contact with Ms. Boone, were you able to observe any injuries?
Yes, sir.
Person?
Yes, sir. She had swelling and bruising in her right eye.
And ma'am, were you able to make contact with Mr. George Torres?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to notice any injuries on his person?
Yes, sir. He had red markings and some abrasions around his neck.
Ma'am, at a certain point in time, did you place Ms. Boone under arrest?
Yes, sir. I detained her and placed her in my vehicle.
Ma'am, at that time, do you recall or remember Ms. Boone asking you, why am I in trouble?
Yes, sir.
And without saying what you said, but did you respond to her?
Yes, sir.
After that, ma'am, do you remember Ms. Boone asking you why? Because I fucking fought back.
Yes, sir.
Back on August the 28th of 2019.
There ended up being a battery call.
And, sir, were you the lead officer on this case?
Yes,
Were there any other backup officers there with you?
I believe so.
Sir, on that date, August the 28th of 2019, did you come in contact with Sarah Boone?
Yes,
Sir, on that date, did you observe any injuries on Sarah Boone?
I observed redness on the left side of her neck and what to be an old injury to her right eye.
Sir, on August 28th of 2019, did you come in contact with George Torres?
Yes,
And did you notice any injuries on Mr. Torres?
yes, he had some redness on it by his left eye.
Sir, on that day, was Mr. Torres placed under arrest?
Yes,
Is it fair to say that Mr. Torres had quite a few marks on him?
from my report, I remember marking the left by redness by his left eye.
And did you have the body-worn camera activated when you responded to this call?
I believe so.
Did Mr. Torres refuse to say what happened that day?
He did.
Based on the conclusion of your investigation, which involved talking to Ms. Boone and attempting to talk to Mr. Torres, as well as your visual observations of both them and the scene, is that how you all reach your conclusions?
Yes.
Now we're zooming in on Sarah Boone as she writes on her notepads provided by the defense. She's got a blue pen and she sets it down, sitting there listening to the attorneys as they speak to the judge. She's got the eyeliner on today. Can't be heard from Timu. She even has like a new story about a staircase incident. It's like, oh, the noises that my neighbor heard the night of the murder, actually, it was from the day before. They are both mistaken. Yeah, there was actually a staircase incident when George grabbed my hair and dragged me down and clumps of my hair were everywhere. I was missing pieces of my hair. I'm like, why was that not documented when they took pictures of you then? Why did you not mention that to the detectives? The only recent incident that you mentioned, the detectives, was the rod incident that happened a month before. You said everything was good between the two of you guys. Then now all of a sudden, there's a staircase incident. Detective Koepsell is back on the stand. However, they're going to use her to impeach another witness. He claimed that Sarah Boone said that she was trying to teach him a lesson.
Tell you that he had contact with Sarah Boone on February the 24th of 2020.
Are you asking the night of the incident when police were called out?
Yes, the next morning.
So not the night of the incident.
The day that we were called.
That you were called out.
Okay.
The 24th.
So yes, he did have contact with her, but it wasn't in the morning. It was while we were there.
While you were there?
Yes.
Okay. What time did you get there? That's probably what's going on.
I got there around 14:20 hours, which would be 2:20 in the afternoon.
Okay. So the afternoon on the 24th.
No, it was later. I recall, I believe I was doing paperwork in my vehicle, so it would have been at some point during the investigation, but it wasn't, I didn't notice him until, I'm not sure if I noticed him until before or after Sarah was interviewed.
All right. But to his interview part, the interview.
I'm not sure if he replayed what exactly occurred that day, but I do know he mentioned something about, she mentioned being dragged down the stairs a couple days prior.
Did he say to you during that interview that Sarah Boone told us that a couple of days ago they had gotten into a fight where he grabbed her by her hair and dragged her down the steps?
I would assume that he's reading my report, and that does sound similar to what my report should say.
So this statement.
Interesting. So now we have a mentioned staircase incident, but still doesn't line up with the time frame that she told when she was on the witness stand. She said it happened the night before. He's saying it happened a couple days before. All right, let's see what the jury's going to believe.
Was given on the 27th of February. I'm sorry, the 26th of February. Would you
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. The contact and the statement that Ms. Boone made to Mr. Moreno was on the 24th
Or I guess it could. What did she say, a couple days ago? A few days ago.
of February. Is that correct?
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
When Mr. Moreno is saying that Ms. Boone came up to him and made this statement that we
Mr.
just talked
Moreno?
about,
Yes,
that was on February the 24th. Is that correct?
that is correct.
So when she said a couple of days ago, that would have brought it back to February the 22nd. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes.
Did he say that Sarah Boone stated that she was teaching him a lesson and things got out of hand and that she fell asleep?
I don't recall the entirety of that being accurate. Yeah, I don't recall the entirety of what he just said being accurate.
Do you remember him saying that at all?
He did say that she had, I believe he said on the recording, passed out. So that's why, like, part of the statements might be accurate, but
Okay. Ma'am, would it refresh your memory if you were to see the recorded statement?
his recorded statement,
Yes.
the transcription?
Yes.
Sure, yeah, great.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I wish I knew more about the conversation between Sarah Boone and Moreno, because
Okay,
When you
George is dead at this point.
ready.
Like, he's dead.
okay.
And wasn't she panicking and stuff?
I don't recall
and here
all
she
the
is talking
statements
about
that you asked.
George
the way
dragging
you
her down the
asked it,
stairs.
but-
Would it help if I repeat it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
You asked, like, you said multiple statements, so
Yes, ma'am.
this was a, like, 11-minute interview.
All right. The statement would be that Sarah Boone stated to Mr. Moreno that she was teaching him a lesson and things got out of hand and that she fell asleep. And I'm wanting to know
Did you
if
say, okay, I thought I heard you say passed out the first time. I'm not sure if you said passed out or fell asleep.
fell asleep.
Fell asleep, okay.
And what
He
I'm
passed
asking
out.
is there any indication that he told you that statement on the date of that interview on the 26th?
How's it helpful for the defense? When the state was presenting and he was doing the cross-examination, I think he was trying to, with the maintenance guy, I think he was trying to show that, like, hey, the statement about you saying Sarah Boone's trying to teach George a lesson, did you see this anywhere else? And it seems like, to me, my impression was it was not stated anywhere else until that day when he was testifying on the stand. That was my understanding of it. So I think that's where he's going with this.
Sorry, I'm trying to go to the part where we talked about that.
Yes, ma'am, take it time.
Okay, so like I had stated, there were certain things that I thought was accurate from your statement. He stated, I don't really, do I just read exactly what it says? Do you need like the number next to it or anything?
Yes, I have no problem if you reading what he said.
Okay, then she,
I would object.
Approach.
Yeah, I thought you were not supposed to read from it. Or I don't know. I'm trying to think. Because I know, like, there are times where
Ma'am, you cannot read the statement at this time.
you use it
Okay.
to
Thank
refresh
you.
in your memory.
You may continue, Mr. Henderson.
he described,
Hang on.
No.
Just wait for a question,
so
okay?
sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, sorry.
Ma'am, and anywhere in that interview, do you see reference to this statement? That Sarah stated that she was teaching him a lesson and things got out of hand and that she fell asleep.
No to the first two parts of your question. I heard passed out the first time you asked me this question, and that's why I said that part of it was accurate, because he did say that she passed out in his statement. That was what Sarah told him.
Okay, did she say she was teaching him a lesson? Is that in there?
No,
And things got out of hand. Is that in there?
no, I don't recall that.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
I would expect this would be done with the maintenance witness, though, not with her.
And again, ma'am, this interview was on February the 26th of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
You love her facial expression. She's not having it. Why did he press on that? To show that when Moreno testified that he heard Sarah saying she was trying to teach George a lesson, the defense is trying to say that, no, you didn't hear that. And that is something that you're making up now on the stand, I guess. Sarah would never lie. She's a straight student. So I think that was really good for the defense. I think so far, things are looking good for the defense for the first three witnesses. Because if the jury bought a scintilla of Sarah Boone's story about her and George and believe all the injuries that she got.
Yes, sir.
And then now we have deputies testifying in the stand saying that, yeah, I responded to the scene. Yeah, we placed him under arrest. Yeah, she had bruises on him. Yeah, she had a black eye. Yeah, he also has some scratches on his eyes. And then we hear from Detective koepsell, and they're pushing on, okay, so the trying to teach him a lesson thing, that could be made up, right? Because it wasn't brought up in the recorded interview. But I don't know if maybe that was brought up. I mean, there's no cross-examination. So I'm assuming maybe there's no other report that would have mentioned, hey, Abraham Moreno said that Sarah Boone was trying to teach George a lesson. The maintenance guy was on. So that's why I was like, isn't it better to ask the maintenance guy this and to try to impeach him? Our next witness is going to be Dr. Michael Brannon. Now, we have two psychologists that are on the defense's side for them to be called on. And Dr. Michael Brannon, it is my understanding, I don't think he evaluated Sarah Boone, but he's here as an expert to talk about battered spouse syndrome. So Dr. Michael Brannon, just a reminder, testified in a case recently. And I think that's why Owens really wanted him for this case. There was a woman named Marsha Thompson that was in an abusive relationship with her husband. And I don't know the ins and outs about this case. I'm just repeating from what I've seen on Court TV and some articles that I've read. But she was in a very abusive relationship and one day shot her husband quite a few times. some of the bullets went in his back as well. I don't know what her triggering event was. But Marsha Thompson was acquitted.
The objection is sustained.
So battered spouse syndrome is usually a woman's response. Doesn't have to be, but that's a classic historical research went into how women respond in situations in which there's intimate partner violence, when they've been the victim of violence. Now we know, of course, in other kinds of relationships, men can be a victim of it as well, or whether it's a heterosexual or homosexual relationship, that both men and women can be victims. But we still know the majority of those individuals that are
Hey, he's doing better than Dr. Don Hughes, okay?
diagnosed with that condition or given that condition, classified with that condition, are women.
Bless you.
We do know that it's a reaction, a strategy that's developed by the person who's being abused to someone who's abusing them in an intimate partner situation. And essentially what they're doing is they've made a determination that they can't effectively escape from the abuse. They can't just leave for some reason. They feel in danger, or they've been threatened if they leave that something bad will happen to them. So it's a cognitive or thinking strategy on the part of the person being abused that I have to develop some coping skills or ways of protecting myself, or maybe even loved ones as well, from some form of imminent violence or danger or lethality. Something bad will happen to me if I don't develop a way of handling this abuse, this constant abuse that's coming towards me. So the battered wife syndrome is really a way of thinking. It's a psychological change that happens with a victim in terms of the way they cope and strategize to stay safe for themselves and other loved ones as well.
I want him to tie this back to Sarah Boone because, you know, he's giving us what a battered spouse woman is like, a battered spouse person is like, and he's giving us these definitions and how they're fear in their lives and things like that. But how does this tie in with Sarah Boone? I don't know if they're going to tie it to Sarah Boone because I think when they had him on as a consultant. So he's just going to testify to battered spouse, but they try to enter him as an expert. And then it seems like the state objected and that was sustained. So are we still trying to see if he's still a battered spouse expert so we can formally enter him in as one? Or what are we doing here? Because how does this tie with Sarah Boone? Let's just get to the point.
But that's not enough. There also has to be what's called coercive control. Coercive control is really...
Coercive control. Okay, I wonder who did the controlling in the relationship.
Keeping the person's social interactions, overseen on a regular basis, controlling money, controlling preferences, even TV preferences, sometimes social media, looking at social media that the person is accessing or looking at, who they're talking to on Facebook, who they're texting. So it's a combination of abuse and coercive control that results in a person feeling victimized, but that's still not enough. That person then has to feel like they can't escape from that. They've either been told, if you leave me, you're going to die, or a family member is going to be harmed, your children, your mother, whatever it might be. And as a result of that, they develop strategies to cope with that, acquiescing, pleasing, doing anything they're asked to do, demeaning themselves, allowing themselves to be controlled. All of the things that would fend off, if you will, some abuse or attack or threat to them or someone who surrounds them.
I mean, I don't know. The coercive control thing is definitely like ding, 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 ding in our heads because it's like, okay, coercive control. George didn't have a cell phone. George had to use Sarah's phone, Sarah's iPad, whatever the fuck it is that she had to communicate with other people, to even try to watch porn, but he wasn't allowed to do that. Sarah had control of what George did for activities. So like on the days that George was off or didn't work, I don't know. It's like, okay, George, today we're going to do painting, puzzles, and we're going to do music. Oh, you want to drink today? Well, I want you to have a sense of accomplishment. So why don't we do chores first and then we can get shit-faced drunk at noon? What do you think about that, George? And also, George, your music is too fractious. We got to listen to something better just so we're in a jolly good old mood. Okay, George, what do you think about that?
Appear in your analysis or assessment?
Yes.
Okay, I'm listening.
And the way they appear is they can appear either from the abuser or the abused or both. What can happen from the abuser standpoint is they may only be abusive, or the abuse may become worse if they abuse substances. From the abused standpoint, it may be self-medication. It may be...
And I'm not not saying that George may have not been controlling with Sarah too. He may have been controlling as well. He may have been really jealous, and he may have not liked it when she tried to talk to other people or when she constantly ran back to her ex for every single thing. I'm not saying it was completely one way, but I'm saying that we definitely see Sarah being some of these things. George is still kind of like, okay, we're only taking Sarah's words for it so far. I mean, honestly, you know, people pay money to listen to this guy. We're getting a free lecture right now. So we're getting a free lecture. We don't know, you know, I don't think he's going to tie it to Sarah Boone because that's a different expert. I think he's just here to talk about battered spouse syndrome and yeah, just to give us the ins and outs about it. So we're getting a free lecture right now, okay?
Now, I want to go back just a second. We talked about the subjective nature of the abused individual's understanding of what's happening. Does this subjective, or does the experience that they have suffered result in, on occasion, their experiencing or their anticipating or assuming or imagining a threat that others may not?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Was Sarah diagnosed with BSS or are they just claiming it? Sarah met with Dr. Julie Harper like 4 years ago. It seems like Dr. Julie Harper did not diagnose her with BSS. They recently rehired Dr. Julie Harper again because, you know, she has the most familiarity with Sarah Boone, met with her a couple times already. So they had the same expert to evaluate her again. And then recently, Dr. Julie Harper, I guess, said that she qualifies for battered spouse syndrome. We're listening to a different expert right now. I think Dr. Julie Harper, we're not going to hear her until tomorrow. Owens mentioned her this morning. I don't know what the fuck he said, but he mentioned her this morning. So maybe we'll hear from Dr. Julie Harper today. But from what he said yesterday, seems like Dr. Julie Harper was coming in tomorrow. But I don't know. Owens, you guys ever watch House of Cards? You guys remember Doug Stamper? He would always be like whispering into like Frank's ears.
Objection is sustained.
Can battered women sin?
Yeah, I agree. So Lady Luck says, Sarah was so afraid for her life that she went upstairs, went to bed, not worried about if he escaped the suitcase. Oh, wait, no, she assumed that he could get out. Her story makes no sense. I wish Dr. J hammered, not Dr. J, I wish Mr. J hammered more on that. And then I wish Mr. J was like, hey, you know, I noticed that you said it previously when you would go upstairs and sleep that you would barricade yourself in. Why didn't you barricade yourself in this time? Huh? Why didn't you barricade yourself in? Especially if you thought that he was going to be free and he's going to be let loose and you're in fear of your life. Why didn't you barricade yourself in? Also, why would you feel safe going to sleep knowing that in the past incidents, according to you, that you fell asleep before and he's attacked you while you're sleeping? So why would you go to sleep again? Also, in the past, you called 911. Why didn't you call 911 this time? You did it all the time. You had no issues with it. Or why didn't you call Brian Boone and ask him to pick you up? It seems like you called Brian Boone and Brian Boone just dismissed you because you're just being drunk and you're just blabbering on. I don't know. I just felt like there's so many things we could just like really hammer her in on. But I don't know. Mr. J was like, speed running. Let's go. Let's hurry and finish this trial. I don't know. Listen, I know we had issues with Miss Carrie Morrissey, but I wish Carrie Morrissey did the cross-examination. Carrie Morrissey, Creighton Waters. Who are some other ones out there that are very... Camille Vasquez, Juan Martinez. Now, Juan Martinez disbarred. But we need some energy. Okay, some energy. Could the prosecutor argue George was also a battered spouse? I don't think so, because I feel like you might need to be evaluated to be considered one. Maybe he can like just theoretically throw it out there. I don't know if he can or not. I have no idea. I feel like George would have to be here and he's not alive and would have to be evaluated by an expert. So I don't think so. But I don't know. Maybe Mr. J will try to wiggle in something, you know? Yeah, and I wanted Mr. J to emphasize on that too. So on the night that you said that you were defending yourself, can you again describe what injuries George had sustained? Oh, okay, that's great. That's great. And then can you also describe the injuries that you sustained? Oh, you mean the injury that you had on your hand from holding the baseball bat and beating George with? Was there any other injuries? No other injuries. Well then. Now, Mr. J is going to be doing the cross-examination. And I would say I think he's more awake today than he was yesterday. But, you know, yesterday was a very long day. He did the cross-examination. At the very end of the day, they had to stay late. I still say that he should have done cross-examination the next day and the next morning. But I don't know if he was given that option because it seems like the judge just wanted to have it done, have Sarah be done on the stand yesterday. So
But I understand you to say that it's very important to do a comprehensive evaluation to get the full picture of what is going on in the perceived battered spouse mind, correct?
Yes.
So, we've been talking about the importance of doing a comprehensive evaluation with as many collateral sources as one could possibly have when making an assessment about the battered spouse syndrome, correct?
Yes, sir. Relevant piece of information. Yes, sir.
And would you agree that obviously the person who is accused of committing a crime, there are credibility issues that you do need to care for when relying upon that person's history provided about the events leading to that and the past events describing the relationship with the intimate partner?
Yes, sir. In every forensic evaluation, that's the case.
Is this particularly important if there's a comorbidity with an alcohol abuse disorder?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what alcohol abuse disorder means in the DSM-5 TR?
Sure. It's the biggest part of it is it's not just the use of alcohol, it's impairment that happens as a result. So it's the excessive use of alcohol, but that could mean something different, just like the excessive use of marijuana might mean. But it's the use of alcohol to the degree that it impairs or infects a person's life. And with that may come a lot of other things like deceitfulness or aggression or unreliability, sleep or somatic
There we go. Use the defense's expert against Sarah Boone. There we go.
problems, difficulties. So, but the important thing to remember there is that it's the use of a substance that impairs or affects a person's life.
And if there is alcohol involved in the histories being given about either the event in question or any preceding events, must the evaluator take that into account when evaluating the memories and perceptions of the person giving them that history?
Yes, so in introducing that new topic about memory, we know that substances can interfere and impair memory.
Give me a second.
Problem or infects a person. So it's the excessive use
Alcohol abuse disorder means in the DSM.
just like the excessive use of marijuana or unreliability, sleep or somatic problems,
Deceitfulness, aggression.
match up with other sources of information, fear and impair memory. So as a result of that, you'd want to know what they were using, how close it was. If you're talking about a particular event, like a crime, you'd want to know if there was substance usage, and if so, what the person's memory functioning was, and does that match up with other sources of information about what those events were.
Are you
Nope,
familiar
didn't
with
match.
the narcissistic personality disorder?
Yes, sir, of course.
Is that something recognized in the DSM-5 TR?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell us whether or not if a person who is giving a history, whether it's the patient/client or whatnot, has traits, perhaps not a diagnosis, but even just traits of the narcissistic personality disorder, is that something the evaluator should account for in evaluating the credibility of the history given?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because all forms of disorders or conditions or just traits may lead to inaccurate information, either not purposely or purposely. They may be deceptive. So certain personality disorders or traits can lead to deception or inappropriate or inaccurate information. That's why you need more than one source of information. Does what this person is saying to me check out with other sources of information?
Nope.
And I don't mean to quiz you on it, but can you tell us some of the criteria for the narcissistic personality disorder?
I can, yes, sir. So it is a grandiose sense of self-worth. It's the consideration of yourself over anybody else. It's kind of operating in your own world. So it's an inflated sense of who you are. It's a misperception of how important you are to other people and your meaning to other people. It's a sense of specialness, that you stand out from other people in terms of special skill or skills, and that other people, if they don't recognize that, they should recognize that. So the biggest heading there is an inflated sense of self-esteem and grandiosity.
Are you familiar with an adjustment disorder diagnosis?
Yes, sir.
What's that?
Is that in the DSM-5 TR?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Can you tell us about that?
Adjustment disorder is a person's reaction, and it could be emotional, it can be behavioral, or it can be both, to a situation that occurs. You broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, so you're upset about that. And so as a result, you're tearful, you're anxious or nervous or worried about what may happen to you as a result of breaking up with them, or you behaviorally may start not going to work. Or get into more arguments or fights with your children as a result. So it's a temporary reaction to a stressful situation that occurs in some individuals.
And hypothetically, if a person who is giving a history for criteria of diagnosis. Let me strike that. If somebody is giving a history and that is being used
I'm smarter than 8 lawyers.
to come to an evaluation conclusion of battered spouse syndrome, does this trauma necessarily have to be coming from a man to a woman?
No.
And in fact, as times have changed, language has changed, and so when we keep referring to it as battered woman syndrome in the courtroom today, what we're actually talking about now is battered spouse syndrome or even intimate partner violence.
Yes, sir. I mean, interpartner violence can happen outside legal settings, but it's really a kind of the large over-grouping, if you will, to be able to talk about all of these other things that can happen as a result, like trauma-based disorders and battered spouse syndrome. And you're right. The later research has kind of pulled us away from thinking this only happens to women in heterosexual relationships. We know now there's all sorts of derivations, and that men can suffer also from battered spouse syndrome, battered person syndrome, homosexual couples. So we know it goes around to everybody, but still, women are more often diagnosed with battered spouse syndrome than anybody else.
Does the trauma have to come in the form of physical violence?
No, sir.
Does it have to come in the form of sexual violence?
No, sir.
Can it come in the form of emotional or mental violence?
Yes, sir.
And would examples of that include such as running the partner down and telling them that they're no good and, just general insulting and lowering their value?
It could. Remember, that's the stimulus, so it would depend on how the person who's receiving that responds to it as to whether or not it becomes traumatic. But yes, sir, that would be the first red flag you'd want to investigate.
And you mentioned isolation before. So if somebody in a hypothetical intimate partner setting is trying to isolate the partner from his or her family members or friends or coworkers, can that be, and I'm not saying necessarily, can that be indications of intimate partner violence that could lead to battered spouse syndrome?
So sure, that would be an example of coercive control. So if a person was doing that, that's consistent with that classification of battered person syndrome. Yes.
And hypothetically, controlling another person, the intimate partner's personal property or effects, such as a birth certificate or identification papers, can that be indication of emotional trauma towards the partner who is lacking the control over those identification papers?
So that's a stimulus that could
That sounds very, very specific. Did Sarah Boone do that to Brian Boone or something? I don't know, that's a very specific thing.
result, depending on how the person subjectively perceives it, in some trauma. So yes, all of the things that you mentioned could be stimulus, if you will, that a person could perceive as traumatic.
And hypothetically, if one partner A gives partner B a gift, such as a bicycle, but partner A continues to maintain that the bicycle is his or hers because he or she bought it, even though it was a gift to B, can that be a form of emotional abuse towards B?
Sure, it sounds like control, but I guess you could interpret it as emotional abuse too, but it sounds more like a control mechanism that'd be consistent.
And I'm not suggesting that it's legally or morally okay, but when one intimate partner does these hypothetical emotional things, non-physical violent things to partner B, if partner B has poor personal skills and coping skills and maybe consuming alcohol, is it unreasonable or unfathomable to hear that partner B responded with physical violence to partner?
Objection, assuming facts not in evidence.
Sustained. Yes.
Okay, Mr. J doing a good job there using the defense's witness against them. You went up there and broadly talked about battered spouse syndrome. Wasn't able to tie it with Sarah Boone because I guess he's just a consultant. But when Mr. J up there is like, oh man, so narcissistic personality disorder, are you familiar with that? Can you tell us a little bit about it? Okay, all right. What about like credibility issues with substance abuse? Yeah, tell us about that too. Okay, all right, sounds good. Man, what about control? Men could also be victims as well. All right, men could also be victims.
After hearing argument of counsel, the objection is overruled.
Would you agree that anybody in a certain legal setting has a motivation to present themselves in a certain way?
Yes, to do impression management, either depending on the outcome. So if there's punitive sanctions, they may lie to make themselves look worse, or as a result, if they're in other settings, like divorce settings, they may lie to make themselves look better. So there's always some impression management you have to kind of look through in your evaluation.
And that's important for an evaluator?
It should be looked at in...
Wait a second, he brought up in a legal setting and in a divorce setting. who's also going through some divorce issues and trying to settle things in civil litigation with their ex-husband. Oh my goodness. Dr. Brannon. Dr. Brannon, who are you testifying for, Dr. Brannon? Who are you testifying for?
Or as a result, if they're in other settings, like divorce settings, they may lie to make themselves look better. So there's always some impression management you have to kind of look through in your evaluation.
And that's important for an evaluator.
It should be looked at in every evaluation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Remember that incident where Sarah claims that George got mad that Brian Boone came over and fixed the TV, and we saw like screenshots of George with a baseball bat and then the TV being broken? Well, we actually get to see the video now. Let me know what you guys think of this.
You're gonna help me take this shit out. Real shit. You're gonna help me take it out. You're gonna help me take this shit out. As bad as I want to.
Wouldn't it be smarter to take the TV outside and then smash it outside? That's a big mess they're making.
Say again, sir.
You spoke about it earlier.
Yes, understood.
They're tendering, no cross.
All right, thank you very much. All right. This witness can't be...
Dude, he was running out of breath. Our next witness is a former neighbor of Sarah Boone. She claims to have lived with Sarah Boone in the same apartment for about 4 years. Her and her husband would be sitting on the porch and Sarah Boone would come by, you know, with the 2 dogs, and she's like walking them and she'd be like, "Hey, Sarah, how you doing?" However, she said she would notice some marks around Sarah.
My husband and I was sitting out on the porch and we see her coming with her 2 dogs.
And what happened then?
Then I would call her over with, with her dogs.
And what do you mean by call her over?
When I see her walking with a dog, and I see her and I look at her, and I say, "Hey, Sarah, how you doing?" And that's it.
And would she generally respond to you?
Yes.
And how, I won't go there. Would you spend time with Ms. Boone?
Did I spend time?
Would you spend time speaking with Ms. Boone?
Yes.
How long would you speak with her?
About 15 or 20 minutes. That's all.
And was your husband sometimes involved in those conversations as well?
He just say hi.
Did you witness anything about her person or her body that gave you cause for concern?
Sometimes I would see it like she had been choked around her neck or her arm be hurt. Have a mark on her arm. And I just asked her. She just say, I had a...
Hang on.
Understand.
The objection is sustained.
Was she in an
Just
interview?
for the
I didn't see
record,
it.
instead of telling us what she would say, would she demonstrate any emotion on her face?
Well, I would see the emotion that she was upset about something.
And did you ask about her obvious upset persona? Her upset, the fact that she was upset? Would you ask her about that?
Yeah, well,
Okay, you have to just limit your answer to the question. Would you ask her about that issue? About why she was upset?
Yeah.
Okay. How frequently would that occur?
I would say on the weekends when I see her.
Was that primarily when you saw her on the weekends?
Mostly I would see her walking through, going to her place, and I'm sitting on the porch and I see her then.
Got me seeing her interrogation when she swore on her son's life that it wasn't intentional. Now knowing her defense strategy. Yeah, of course she's going to come up with a whole totally new story. Once the evidence has been presented, once you realize she looked like an ass the first time, she's like, oh, you know what? New story it is. Gosh. I mean, I don't think Sarah was the type of person that was just like an asshole to people. As long as she was able to convince you what a good person she was, and if you bought her shit, then I'm sure she was really nice to you. I'm sure she went to you and she probably cried about George all the time. But any time, if you contradicted her, you went against her, I'm sure that didn't fly.
Did you see law enforcement arrive at the apartment complex?
A couple of times.
And did you ever get involved in any of their investigation?
No, sir.
Were you ever approached by law enforcement and asked for information, evidence, insight into what might be going on?
No, sir.
Now, in all candor, were there occasions when you believed that Sarah Boone may have been under the influence of alcohol?
No, I can't say.
Did you also observe George Torres during the time that you lived there in the apartment complex?
I don't know, man. Everyone else was like, they were drunk as fuck and they were always drunk. We always kind of avoided them.
I didn't see him very much. If we're sitting on the porch, that's the only time I see him.
Did you know Mr. Torres very well?
No.
Was there an incident when you saw Ms. Boone with a black eye?
Yes.
Poor Pearl. She out here trying to do the Lord's work and got drug into Sarah Boone's bullshit. She seems like a nice, sweet woman.
One time I seen with a black eye and like she had been choked one time.
Okay.
Any cross-examination?
Hi, Ms. Walker.
Hello.
Is it fair to say you're not sure when exactly you saw any of those injuries on her, correct?
Say that again?
You're not exactly sure when you saw any of those
I like Mr. J's voice. Hi, Miss Walker. How you doing today? All right, I got to do the cross-examination.
injuries on her, correct?
Once she come past the apartment, I'll be sitting out there because we always sit out there.
Right, but we don't know if this is December or 2018 or anything like that.
I can't remember, sir.
Okay. And is it fair to say you have no idea how she got those marks? Is that fair?
Repeat that again.
Do you have any idea how she got those marks?
On the weekends, I see him and her go in.
Okay. But you don't know who, if anybody, put those marks on her, right?
Well,
Just calls for yes or no.
I can tell when they must have had an argument or something. I hear the dogs barking.
Okay. And you're 5 doors down, right? Unit 8, Unit 3?
Yeah.
Okay. No other questions.
Our last witness of the day after a very long lunch break and having her stuck in security, and we had to do another little mini break. We have Dr. Julie Harper, who we verified also testified in a different case as well. Dr. Julie Harper detailed Garcia's childhood, including the first memory he had of his dad at age 5 when he was being released from prison. And if this is not the same Dr. Julie Harper, I'm just going to cut this out from the video, okay? Like I said, I don't know if it's the same Dr. Julie Harper. It might not be. Garcia was isolated in a stressful home environment as his father engaged in extramarital affairs and dragged his sister along as he committed his own crimes. His father left Miami when he was facing prison, and Garcia was 11. Sigfredo Garcia Sr. left for Mexico and told his family he was going to play the lotto. Okay. I think the departure of his father was the first root of depression, Harper said. He felt abandoned and unloved. Garcia's records date back to 1988. He was arrested for the first time when he was 6 years old for jumping on the roof of the teacher's car. Since then, he was arrested More than 10 times. What the hell? Half of which happened when he was a juvenile. He smoked marijuana, drank alcohol, tried cocaine with his father at a very young age. Jesus. She testified that Garcia went through several Department of Justice, juvenile justice programs. He invested time and effort into a career as an aeronautical engineer, but found that his criminal record prevented him from working in places like an airport. Harper testified. Momo, thank you so much for the 74 bucks on Twitch. Hi, Momo. How are you doing today? How's Linda doing? Harper testified Garcia was shot in the lung and liver in 2005, defending 2 Miami teen who a man was pestering to post nude. The fuck? She said as a result, he's anxious about people creeping up behind him and can't watch movies with violence or gunshots because they give him nightmares. But he literally shot Dan Markel with a gun in his head. Ay, ay, ay. All right. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if it's the same Dr. Julie Harper.
Counselor, you may inquire.
Thank you, Judge.
What y'all think? Her? Is it her?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When did you first get involved with Miss Boone?
It would have been in around June of 2020. It was the first I heard of her case.
And what were you asked to do?
A comprehensive psychological evaluation of Ms. Boone.
And did you do that in Miss Boone's case?
I did.
Okay. And you were given materials as it relates to Sarah Boone to review?
Yes, I have been.
How many times did you meet with Sarah Boone?
So 9 times.
9 times?
Can you tell the jury what you did as part of your evaluation of Sarah Boone?
And at which meeting did you determine that she qualifies for a battered spouse?
Well, we had clinical forensic interview in which I reviewed her background history, so her early childhood. I also assessed her with assessments, meaning I administered 3 psychological tests to her. I reviewed her prior mental health records, her interrogation video, some prior information about her legal history. So she had been previously arrested. I reviewed that as well. We had an opportunity.
Did you read her letters? The letters that she wrote to the judge and all the attorneys? Did you? I'm just curious.
To review the transcript of her interrogation video. So there were a variety of things that would be considered what I did with her.
Okay.
I think she'll probably talk about
some medical
childhood.
records?
Yes.
And did you also consider some records from George Torres's records?
I did see his hospital records.
Now, do you believe that Sarah Boone does have some narcissistic traits?
I do.
She doesn't qualify or meet the criteria for that diagnosis, does she?
I did not diagnose her with that.
All right. Can you elaborate on or explain how you feel that Sarah Boone does have some narcissistic traits?
Well, in meeting with her as part
You sure you want to go there? Okay, let's go.
of the evaluation, the narcissistic traits that I identified would have to do with, as she described, being a straight-A student. She reiterated about her abilities, and I felt that that was evidence that she had low self-esteem, and her coping mechanism was to identify what made her stand out, and that would be consistent.
Hold on a second. I got to slow that down. Okay, what about the doggos? What about her taking care of George? Oh, gosh. I think they're really getting ahead of it. They know Mr. J is going to ask these questions. So, Owen's getting ahead of it.
About her abilities, and I felt that that was evidence that she had low self-esteem, and her coping mechanism was to identify what made her stand out, and that would be consistent with a narcissistic trait.
Your studies and your experience, were they require excessive admiration and whatnot, that there's a reason for that?
She's trying to follow.
If I'm understanding your question, there's a criterion in narcissistic personality disorder related to that.
What I'm getting to is many times.
Is he trying to use his witness to semi-discredit what his other witness said earlier about narcissism?
You may have these narcissistic traits, but really, you suffer from very low self-esteem.
That's the underpinning of that criterion.
Would you explain that to the jury?
If I'm allowed to reference the DSM, then I can explain it best.
Just don't read from it. Just
All right.
You need to review. If you need to read a paragraph and then explain it to the jury.
So based on the description in the DSM, if a person's self-esteem is very fragile and they have low self-esteem, they may require more outside admiration or even appear more grandiose in their abilities because at root, they don't feel secure and confident. And so it's what we would call a defense. And so that criterion is actually a way that a person tries to make themselves feel better.
Sorry.
And then secondarily, the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder is listed when you're considering personality disorders. The DSM guides you that if there are personality changes that are associated with the exposure to a trauma, then you should consider post-traumatic stress disorder and not a personality disorder.
Have you diagnosed her with anything? And we'll elaborate on that. But through your assessment, have you diagnosed her with anything?
Yes, so she has a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. She has symptoms of anxiety that would be consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. So that is an anxiety disorder.
And you feel like she suffers from post-traumatic stress?
I do.
Now, at the time of this event, we're talking February 23rd of 2020, you were aware that she did not have much family support?
Yes.
Sarah inflicts PTSD rather than having PTSD. I think it's both. I think she inflicted PTSD on George, and then I think, George also inflicted it on her as well. I don't think I'm going to debate anything that she's going to say. I think I agree with her that, like, Sarah probably has PTSD, whatever. The narcissistic thing, I don't know. I don't know how to diagnose someone that has narcissism, so I don't fucking know. Maybe she does have narcissistic personality disorder. We'll see what the state's expert says. However, not to say that her testimony is a waste of my time or anything, but what Sarah did that night, the suitcase thing, I think she was just trying to get vengeance, okay? I think she was trying to get vengeance. She was trying to get back at him. Yes, I believe she probably has PTSD. Yes, I believe that she got beat by George and the abuse happened both ways, maybe more severe, more physically severe on her, But that night, Sarah, suitcase, George in there. She left him in there. I think she wanted to get back at him. She wanted to teach him a lesson. She kept saying over and over again without actually admitting that she wanted to teach him a lesson. But it seems like she was just trying to make him suffer and she wanted to get back at them. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, what she's saying now doesn't, we don't really give a fuck. But at the same time, I kind of don't give a fuck because what Sarah did that night is just, I don't think it's a result of like, I don't know. I don't think George was coming after her and then she like had to react and like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like I need to react now. I think she was just being a fucking asshole and then she was torturing him and then she left him in there and then she fell asleep. So, but I will listen to her. Okay. She seems like a nice lady.
Okay. Now, as it relates to Sarah Boone, what type of psychological testing did you administer?
I administered the inventory of legal knowledge, and that is a test that has to do with whether or not she was validly participating regarding her understanding of the legal process. I also administered the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms test.
Now, explain to the jury what that Miller...
And someone mentioned this earlier. They were like, oh, George should have probably have been in jail. I agree with that. But George doesn't deserve to be killed the way that he did. I agree with that. So, yeah, George probably should have went to fucking jail and stay in jail. Sarah Boone, we're going to hear more about Sarah Boone and what she did to George. But I do agree. George probably should be in jail. However, George being put in the suitcase and left like that and dying the way he did, no, he doesn't deserve that. As much of a piece of shit people may think he is, just something that we just, in our society, we don't punish people on our own, right? We let the law handle it. And Sarah took it in her own hands and she left him in the suitcase and she tortured him.
Forensic assessment of symptoms testing.
So that is also a test of feigning to identify if she's validly participating in the evaluation. So if she had endorsed psychological symptoms or psychiatric symptoms that would be unusual or not typical of a valid psychiatric patient.
What were the results of Ms. Boone's test on the Miller Forensic?
She validly participated. There was no indication of any feigning or malingering.
And as far as the inventory of legal knowledge case, what were the results?
Again, she was validly participating, and she did not even come close to the cutoff. That would put her in the range of feigning.
Are you sure? I don't know, man. What about like exaggerations? Do you think Sarah may have exaggerated a lot, though? Do you think she exaggerated? Tell me she didn't exaggerate?
Of legal knowledge case, what were the results?
Yeah, George was literally the battered one from that night. He was the one that had all the bruising. Sarah had none. Okay, she had bruising on her hand from holding the bat because she was beating him so hard with it.
Again, she was validly participating, and she did not even come close to the cutoff. That would put her in the range of feigning.
Did you diagnose Sarah Boone with anything?
Yes, so post-traumatic stress disorder. It's my opinion at the time of the offense, she had depression, and she had an alcohol use disorder.
All right. I know we've talked about post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know if I need to ask you anything further. I think the jury probably understands that. Is there anything else you wanted to add about that disorder?
No.
I'm not sure what the jury's already been told about post-traumatic stress disorder, but in Sarah Boone's case specifically, because of enduring, she specifically noted the time that she was stabbed with the knife as being an extremely...
Sustained.
You have viewed... Have you viewed some exhibits involving her being stabbed?
I think that we have had exhibits in common. I'm not sure what was admitted.
Have you seen the physical scar from Sarah Boone being stabbed in the back of the leg?
Yes, I've seen her scar.
You're saying? Overruled.
Sarah Boone, this February 23rd,
Finally!
2020 event. Is your opinion that she was suffering from battered spouse syndrome at the time of that event?
Yes, she had the patterns ingrained in her behavior that would be typical of a victim who's responding to traumatic events in a predictable way. So that would fit that.
Then it's fair to say that because of the intimate partner and the prior violence, that you would have a heightened sense of when danger was about to occur.
Yes.
When a threat was about to occur.
Yes.
Threat of danger.
That's right.
Now I want to talk about placating the abuser. A victim placating an abuser. Are there predictive cues?
I mean, she could have had a heightened sense of danger because of the past history between her and George. But at the same time, she had the baseball bat. He was in the suitcase.
Which
she was beating him.
An abuser may exhibit to a victim that result in a high level of anxiety arousal, in which the battered woman may attempt to reduce through several different means to delay the beating. Can you explain that?
Yes. So the phase of the relationship that starts with that tension building, that is a jumping off point potentially. So if you can stop the escalation, you might stay in phase one for a period of time. Phase one being that tension building phase and trying to reduce it and not allow it to escalate. So placating the abuser might include distraction. It could include substance use. It could include a change of scenery. There are a lot of things that a partner will learn to do so that they don't have the escalation into an abusive event, if possible. It doesn't always stop it.
But doesn't what Sarah did contradict that, though? So, yes, she was trying to keep George busy, okay? Or maybe she was trying to control him and his activities that time. But at the same time, you're trying to placate to avoid the abuse, to avoid the anger. Why the fuck would they be drinking at 12 o'clock? Giant bottles. Giant bottles. Why be drinking at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day? Huh? Drinking all day. I'm sorry, but Sarah Boone's actions just does not align. It just doesn't align. I don't think she was like, oh my God, I have to make sure George is busy or else he's going to beat me. No, I don't think it was like that. I think she just wanted to control him. And then she's like, let's get fucking drunk.
I'm reviewing all of the data, all the reports, the medical records, and whatever reports you considered, videotape that you may have watched. As it relates specifically to Sarah Boone, are her words her power?
Her words, I would say, are the weapon that she has.
Explain that to the jury.
In reviewing the available videos that I had to review, you would see that when Ms. Boone is very stressed, when she's experiencing a high level of anxiety, she becomes short in her tone. You can hear that in her voice. There's a strain, sharper words come out. I think that that is the way that she would try to respond to Mr. Torres. You can hear that sharpness in her voice when she's very stressed out.
So when she was saying, "That's my name, don't wear it out," was she stressed out then? That's a long phrase. It's not short. Yeah, what about laughing at him? Is she going to say that, like, oh, Sarah was just really nervous because she was afraid that George was going to get out? Why was she taunting him then? Oh, because, you know, she was just high anxiety. Okay. We got to explain the video, explain the actions of Sarah in the video. Mr. J is going to be doing the cross-examination, and I think he does a pretty good job. Definitely way more awake than the cross-examination yesterday of Sarah Boone.
This kind of abuse can come in the form of emotional or mental abuse outside completely of physical or sexual abuse, correct?
So that is a component. You can have extreme mental abuse occur of a person, yes.
And if that person responds to that environmental stimuli of whatever it is the partner is saying or doing to them, they may internally view that as traumatic.
They could.
Or they may not.
That's right.
It's entirely possible for two people to be in a 3.5-year relationship that has physical violence and neither one of them feel traumatized by that. Is that correct?
That's right. If they have enough supportive or positive experiences that would negate that ratio, so of positive to negative, they may feel okay.
And a man can be subjected to this sort of trauma, whether it be physical, emotional, or sexual, by an intimate partner as well, correct?
That's right.
Can I ask her if Sarah Boone has PTSD from what she did to George? Any regrets? Any sadness? And I think Mr. J does a really good job at showing, hey, the potential abuser could also be Sarah as well, right?
Hypothetically saying, I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you, you'll never do better than me. Is that a potential component of the control that one in an abusive relationship might exert over an intimate partner?
Yes, to try to not encourage their partner to leave them. Yeah.
Considering gifts, hypothetically, that one partner has given to another partner, but considering it still to be your property because you gave it to them, is that a form of potential exertion of control over an intimate partner? When you give somebody, hypothetically, a bike, but still consider it your own bike?
There's a better way to ask that.
I mean, I don't think that's strong evidence of that. I think that it does happen in relationships and people do that.
The engagement ring?
That in general, but I wouldn't say that's like really specific to this.
It's okay. That was just kind of like a bad question.
How about hypothetically exerting control over your intimate partner's identification papers, such as a birth certificate?
So that can happen. People will hide things that are required for work. For instance, like your driver's license or things like that.
Now I'm going to...
Bye, Dino. Have a good one.
I'm asking yes or no questions. If Mr. Owens would like you to elaborate further, he's going to have that opportunity in a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hypothetically, if one partner destroys another partner's belongings, is that a potential example of exerting control in a relationship?
Yes.
Thank you. Hypothetically, is threatening to or actually using legal process as a threat against your intimate partner in a potential indicia of controlling your partner? For instance, X, Y, or Z, or I'm going to get you arrested.
Yeah.
Indicia. I've never heard of the word indicia before. Okay. I know what it means, but I didn't know that you could say indicia. I thought it was just like an indicator. Okay. Indicia. Signs, indications, or distinguished marks.
Yes, I would agree that happens.
So this next segment, we've actually never heard of this incident before, and I had to replay it back because I wasn't sure if I heard it correctly. But Mr. J talks about, the honeymoon phase. Now, Sarah Boone claims that there was already abuse happening on the first date with Sarah Boone, first date with George, the first time that she met him. Again, you guys listen to it and let me know if I misinterpreted it, because I kept listening over and over again. I was like, did Mr. J say it in a way that I didn't understand, or am I misinterpreting? I don't know what's going on here.
Now, I assume you would agree that this cycle of violence that we've described, the tension building, the blow up, and then the honeymoon phase, you would agree that just one of those cycles could be enough to give somebody a traumatic experience if they took it as a traumatic experience.
Yes.
The defendant described her first date with Mr. Torres to you, did she not?
She did.
And at the time of this first date, they had obviously just met that night at a bar, correct?
Right.
They were not financially intertwined, correct?
That's right.
They shared no children in common?
That's right.
They did not live together?
Correct.
And after this description that she provided you, which included him smashing her phone, correct?
Yes.
Hitting her, first time she'd ever been hit in her life, correct?
Yes.
And making her crouch in like a fetal position on the porch for several hours to the point where it hurt her back, correct?
Yes.
Threatened to sodomize her,
Correct.
and she described that she was all bruised up, correct?
Yes.
After that, this is the first time she had ever met him, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
There was a second date, correct?
Yes.
Wait, really?
Threatened to several provided you, which included him smashing her phone, correct?
Yes.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is this during the...
Right.
Described her first date with Mr. Torres to you, did she not?
She did.
What?
And at the time of this first date, they had obviously just met that night at a bar, correct?
Right.
They were not financially intertwined, correct?
That's right.
They shared no children in common?
That's right.
They did not live together?
Correct.
And after this description that she provided you, which included him smashing her phone, correct?
Yes.
Hitting her, first time she'd ever been hit in her life, correct?
Yes.
And making her crouch in like a fetal position on the porch for several hours to the point where it hurt her back, correct?
Yes.
Threatened to sodomize her,
Correct.
and she described that she was all bruised up, correct?
Yes.
After that, this is the first time she had ever met him, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
There was
What?
a second date, correct?
Yes.
Despite not having any of that.
What? First date? Smashing phone, hitting her for the first time, making her crouch on the porch in fetal so that it hurt her back, bruised her up, and then sodomized. This is first date? Usually there's the honeymoon phase. This is the first time we heard on this. I don't know. It seems like, or is he talking about this is the first time that he did this to her? Okay, hold on.
This is the first time she had ever met him, correct?
This is the first time that she had ever met him.
After that, this is the first time she had ever met him, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
There was a second date, correct?
Yes.
Despite
She did? She said it on the stand? When? He said first date. She said it on the stand? Was I that tired yesterday? Did I miss that? Did I miss it?
not having any of that intertwinement that we went through prior to this description, correct?
That's right.
Now, it is possible under what we've discussed, right? Just that quick one date can be that buildup of tension and blow up, correct?
Yes.
But it's different, hypothetically, than saying a spouse who is financially dependent on his or her other spouse in a 20-year marriage with a house full of kids.
I don't know. Looking back, I don't know if it was a good idea for Mr. J bringing this up for the jury because they can further sympathize with her if they believe her. I feel like he should have really he should really hammered on like, hey, is it possible that she just lied about this? Because George being this abusive already on the first date, on the first time they met, I don't know. I think Mr. J bringing it up could have been like a what the fuck to the jury and then maybe possibly gave her more sympathy if they believe Sarah Boone and think George is a piece of crap.
Than a first date, correct? You would agree in severity in the intertwinement, there's a difference.
There's a difference in intertwinement. The pattern can be exactly the same.
I'm confused. I'm trying to figure out if Mr. J is saying it in a confusing manner, if I'm misinterpreting it. I don't know. I mean, first date? First date? All this happening on a first date?
Now, of course, there are many different reasons why somebody will stay in a relationship that, when perceived from the outside, others would say is abusive, correct?
Okay, I want to go back. I will go back. Yeah, I got my video. Give me a second.
The defendant described that she felt like she was making Mr. Torres a better person, correct?
That's right.
A better father,
Yep.
correct?
Right.
A better ex-husband?
With phone calls, yes.
And she would tell him to call his children,
That's right.
make sure that he sent them Christmas gifts,
Yes.
and make sure he sent his ex-wife money when she asked, correct?
Yes.
So you would agree those are indicia, or indicators, sorry.
Understand?
I know you know. That perhaps she wasn't necessarily financially dependent on Mr. Torres, correct? I'm not saying conclusion, but those are indicators if you're saying, please spend your money elsewhere, that I don't need your money, correct?
No, because even if there was money that was needed by Ms. Boone, her tendency to put the needs of her partner before her would direct her to do exactly that, like make him better, make him have the availability to visit his children, send them presents, even if she's the one that needed the money.
And in her perspective, Mr. Torres needed her to do this to make him a better person, correct?
Okay, yeah, because I was like, wait, you guys are confusing me. Because I was like, I don't remember her saying on the stand yesterday. My understanding is that she told the doctor, and then he's bringing it up. But why didn't she bring it up on the stand when she was talking about meeting him for the first time? Also, I want to know, when did she tell this doctor this first date thing? Was it recent or was it a long time ago?
Since even if she's the one that needed the money.
And in her perspective, Mr. Torres needed her to do this to make him a better person, correct?
I believe that, yes.
At the time, in the apartment in 2020, she had not been working, correct?
That's right.
And had not been working for some time.
That's right.
And what she was doing was living off of the settlement that she had been bought out of with her husband, was lump sum, plus $1,000 a month in alimony and $100 a month in child support, correct?
Yes.
And it was Mr. Torres, $100 a month in
Jesus.
child support, was lump sum, plus $1,000 a month in alimony and $100 a month in child support, correct?
Yes.
And it was Mr. Torres who would work, correct?
He worked at Ace Hardware, I think.
When he would show up.
Right.
Sometimes he didn't show up, is what she indicated, correct?
Yes.
Because of his drinking problems.
Yes.
I think this part got a little bit lost, at least on me, but I think Mr. J was trying to say that Sarah Boone reported things to you that were very different than what was reflected in her hospital records. So there's this one time where Sarah Boone needed to get some extreme mental help, and I think she told the psychiatrist that, or said the psychologist, Dr. Julie Harper, that it was because something with George. But when Mr. J had her go back to the hospital records, it seems like Sarah Boone went in there for a completely different reason. But there were so many hiccups, and I wish Mr. J kind of cleaned it up a little bit more at the very end, just so we kind of like understood what the hell just happened.
And that was based upon her being found stumbling by law enforcement with a .185, correct? And that's
She walked up. Okay. So I'd have to say no, the way you phrased the question.
Ma'am, Boone was stumbling due to her level of impairment, .185.
Yes, I would agree.
Is that part of the records you relied upon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so what's the issue?
When you talked to Ms. Boone about that, she kind of just described an event of June of 2018 and blurring those two events, did she not?
No, she told me she had 2 different Baker Acts.
Did she describe it as being June of 2018?
To what?
I'll have to reference my interview note to find that if you would like me to.
No.
There's a record that we started with this conversation from October of 2018, and there is a description of her trying to go to the hospital to seek a counselor. So those are 2 different instances.
In January 2018, when she went to the hospital crying and signs of depression,
Bless you.
she indicated that was because her husband and son had gone out of town and she was feeling lonely and sad about having lost her job a few weeks earlier, right?
There were numerous stressors there, yes.
Nothing
What was the job? What was the job?
mentioned about any problems with somebody named Mr. Jorge or George Torres, correct?
You're talking about January?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was she working at, Claire's?
So the hospital records are not referencing her relationship with George on the January date.
Okay. No George mentioned. Now the staircase incident. Again, Mr. J is going to remind the jury that it seems like the staircase incident and what happened to Sarah Boone is not reflective of what they saw with Sarah Boone's lack of injuries when police took pictures of her.
Now, in talking about February 23rd, 2020 with Ms. Boone, you talked to her about that on several occasions, correct?
I did.
And part of one of those conversations, at least, was about an incident that she indicated had happened the night before February 23rd, 2020, correct?
Yes.
And she indicated and told you that she had been dragged down the stairs the night before the suitcase incident, correct?
That's right.
And in part of your review of this case, you reviewed all the crime scene photos, correct?
Yes.
And those include photographs of Ms. Boone, correct?
Yes.
And were there any indications in the photographs of injuries on her consistent with being dragged down the stairs of carpet?
Nope.
I didn't see inside her scalp, so I didn't see photos of inside, her hair follicles and this area of her head. On her outward body, there were no indications of that.
Thank you.
Did you ask her how it was that she was injured during this drag?
Sarah Boone indicated that a chunk length of hair was pulled out.
Dragging down the stairs.
I don't think I went through specific injuries to her, no.
Do you agree that alcohol intoxication affects the credibility of a historian that's providing history to you, a patient or a client?
If they're actively intoxicated, yes.
We had talked, you and Mr. Owens, had talked about narcissistic personality disorder earlier.
Yes.
And that is a recognized diagnosis in the DSM-5-TR.
That's right.
And there's 9 of those, correct? 9 traits?
You're talking about the criterion of narcissistic personality disorder? Yes.
I mean, Amber Heard had a clump of hair. It just looked different depending on which picture you looked at.
Like page 761 on your hard copy?
No, I mean, she answered that correctly. She answered that correctly. I won't give her shit for answering about the scalp thing.
Thank you. All right.
Nothing she said so far has pissed me off. Maybe a little side eye, when she was talking about the night of the event and how Sarah Boone had BSS during that time and she had a heightened sense of danger and all that stuff, a little bit side eye. But I haven't really wholeheartedly disagree with anything she said so far.
I have a digital copy.
760, but...
Okay. One of the criteria is has a grandiose sense of self-importance. For example, exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements, correct?
Yes.
2 is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love, correct?
Yes.
3, belief that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with others.
I concur. You guys ever watched that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? I concur. It was when he was pretending to be a doctor and he didn't know what else to add on to the conversation. It was pretending to be a doctor, so he'd be like, I concur. Yes, I concur.
Special or high status people, or institutions, correct?
So 3, just caveat, it says believes, not belief, but the rest of what you said I agree with is the criterion.
4, requires excessive admiration.
Yes.
5, has a sense of entitlement, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. Correct?
Yes.
6 is interpersonally exploitive or and takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. Correct?
Is interpersonally exploitative. I agree.
7 lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. Correct?
Yes.
8 is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her. Correct?
Yes.
9 shows arrogant or haughty behaviors or attitudes.
Yes.
Now, you believe that she has traits of that disorder, correct?
Yes.
Grandiose sense of self-importance?
There are indications that she feels like that or has expressed that before.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
Preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love?
No.
You remember going to the state attorney's office on October 1st, 2024 and giving a deposition?
I do.
And it was in front of a court reporter, like a Mountain Court reporter here?
Yes.
And you swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, correct?
Yes.
And referring to page 89, lines 18 through 20, let me know when you're ready. Are you ready?
Yes.
Did you give the following answer to the following question? Preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love? And your answer was yes?
I did answer yes there.
She does not, according, in your estimation, does not believe that she is special and unique and can only associate with high-status people, correct?
No.
Does not require excessive admiration, correct?
Correct.
Does have a sense of entitlement?
Yes.
Is
Oh, hell
not
yeah.
interpersonally exploitive?
Correct. She's not.
And when discussing whether or not she lacked empathy or was unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings or needs of others, you indicated that that might be the case, but it's not intentional.
In other words, she's not aware if she's inconveniencing others.
Let me think about that. She's not aware that she's inconveniencing others. Is it not aware or not giving a fuck? I think it's not giving a fuck.
So there was 3 of those traits, correct?
Yes.
Not 5, which would be required, correct? For a diagnosis of the personality disorder.
If that were the correct diagnosis, you would need 5.
All right. During your conversations with Ms. Boone, the defendant in this case, she explained to you that cheating to her means when Mr. Torres would look at pornography, correct?
Correct.
Not a real-life woman, correct?
No, not that he was engaging in sexual intercourse with actual women.
Part of the records that you did not review were the text messages that were part of the phone extraction of her phone device, correct?
That's right.
You indicated in your conversation with Mr. Owens that some of the traits that are commonly seen in abusers would be control, jealousy, easily angered.
This could be, yes.
What other traits just common for abusers?
Being a person who segregates their victim away from other sources of support.
Family members. Okay. All right.
Somebody that exhibits coercive control.
Arts and crafts, puzzles. No rock music.
Meaning that they would prevent the person from engaging in activities that would be independent, so restricting their ability to have independent, like life, job, money.
To be independent.
Things like that would be supportive of them being left, for instance. Other things would be using emotional expressions like rage to cause a physiological reaction in another person. So those could be additional descriptions.
Specifically, the materials you reviewed. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Paperwork from prior cases involving Mr. Torres and Ms. Boone.
Yes,
Medical records for Mr. Torres.
that's right.
The medical and Aspire records for Ms. Boone that we discussed.
Yes,
The crime scene photos from the incident in February.
that's right.
Pages 1 through 413 in discovery in this case.
Right.
A photograph of a suitcase and 2 videos involving the suitcase.
That's right.
and additional videos on that phone, correct?
Yes,
Such as baseball bat smash on the TV?
that's part of it, yes.
And then did you review any other videos where there's conversations between Ms. Boone and Mr. Torres?
Yes,
One prior 911 call?
yes,
Now today you had indicated that you had reviewed the photographs from some prior incidents of violence, correct?
yes.
When is it that you did that? Is that recently?
No, there are photos included with the
The prior case packages?
case packages. Thank you. I'm not sure what to call it. So
That's fine.
All right.
All right, and did you review any body worn camera from those prior case packages?
No, I did not. I didn't have that.
Anything else that you reviewed that I've not covered?
Are you speaking of documents only?
Yes, yes, materials other than your 9 visits with Ms. Boone.
All right. Just checking with the
That's fine.
folders I'm prepared
I just
for
wanna make
today. I don't know if, I guess that would be part of the discovery. The investigative report is within those 413 pages.
Did you interview anybody else personally?
Right. Sarah just happened to be an asshole who had PTSD.
Besides Ms. Boone?
Yes.
Who else did you personally interview?
Now what? It doesn't justify what she did to George. Okay.
Melissa Sexton?
All right. Anybody else?
No,
You didn't interview Brian Boone, correct?
I did not.
You did not interview their child in common?
You didn't interview Brian Boone? She didn't even talk to Brian Boone? I feel like that would be very important. The one that is closest to Sarah Boone.
Correct.
Or maybe that was in the budget. Maybe it wasn't.
No,
And you didn't review the phone text messages extracted from her device, correct?
no, I didn't.
Did you review any records from the jail?
No,
And
Wait, did he already? Oh, wait, he's not allowed to bring it up. I was like, did you read the letters that she wrote to her attorneys? But he's not allowed to bring that up in front of the jury. Boo! Can we kick the jury out and ask her if she did review them, though, and her thoughts on that? Because I want to know. She only interviewed one person in her life. Yeah, who was it again? Melissa Sexton, right? Why didn't she interview Brian Boone? Ay, 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 ay. Like I said, maybe not in the budget.
Yes.
Melissa Sexton, is that the property manager? I'm getting hungry.
her device. And you didn't review the phone text messages extracted from her device, correct?
no.
Anybody
It was 413 pages.
did you personally interview?
Melissa Sexton?
All right. Anybody else?
No,
You didn't interview Brian Boone, correct?
I did not.
You did not interview their child in common, correct?
No,
And you didn't review the phone text messages extracted from her device, correct?
no, I didn't.
Did you review any records from the jail?
No,
And
Yes.
Property manager. The property manager that Sarah Boone cried to all the time. Okay, we're caught up with the live. How do we think of Mr. J's cross-examination? Let me address the poll. We have 788 votes. How worried are you about this trial so far? 38% says not worried at all. 49% a little worried. 13% very concerned. Good cross-examination. Great cross.
now let's talk about the February 23rd, 2020. She told you that they didn't really have anything going on to do that particular day, correct?
yes,
It was a Sunday, correct?
yes,
Did some chores, and then as a reward, they could rest after doing those chores, correct?
right,
She indicated to you that she and Mr. Torres did not begin drinking till about 4 p.m., correct?
around 4 p.m.
And you reviewed the crime scene photos of this case, correct?
I did.
That included receipts for some purchases that were made at Publix on February 22nd and 23rd, correct?
That's right.
And one of those receipts was a purchase for a 1.5-liter bottle of Woodbridge Chardonnay at 12:17 p.m. on February 23rd, correct?
Yes,
Did you question her about the inconsistency of them having purchased a bottle of wine at 12:17 that afternoon and not start drinking until 4 p.m.?
No.
And did she tell you that they had any wine left over from the day before that they consumed that day?
At some point, I'm not sure if it was the day that I was going through this line by line with you in my deposition, but I am aware, yes, that there was an unfinished bottle of wine from some other date.
And then, as the receipt showed, there was 2 additional bottles of 1.5 liters of wine purchased at 12:17 p.m. and about 5:30 p.m. on the 23rd, correct?
Right.
And were you aware of approximately how much Ms. Boone, the defendant, weighed at the time of this offense, February 23rd, 2020?
Around 100 pounds.
And in the first 413 pages of discovery, I believe, was the autopsy report, correct?
Right.
And so you're aware that Mr. Torres was 103 pounds at his death?
Yes.
Do you take into account this alcohol consumption when evaluating what Ms. Boone is telling you about the events of the day?
Yes.
Did she tell you whether or not she was intoxicated by the amount of alcohol she consumed that day?
Please silence your cell phone.
What was that ringtone? Da-na-na-na.
You may proceed.
So she did not describe herself as intoxicated originally when we discussed this. So
So the answer is no. She did not describe herself as intoxicated.
intoxicated, right?
Hypothetically.
Okay, wonder why.
Hypothetically, if she had told the jury that she was intoxicated at the time of the offense, would that affect your evaluation of her credibility in the history she provided you?
No, because that was also my opinion.
Did she indicate to you, in describing the events of February 23rd, 2020, that there was any point in time she just simply did not remember?
Yes.
And what points in time are those?
What was Leilani
So
eating?
she did not remember taking the videos of the suitcase, or the incident in the suitcase, until she was at the interrogation room, I guess, and then they were going through them with her. Then she recalled that.
I'm talking about specifically with you. Did she indicate that there were any portions of the night that, or day or night that she did not remember?
I can't recall anything specifically right now.
Hypothetically, if she had indicated to the jury that she did not remember the 9 or 10 minutes immediately preceding the first video being taken, would that be inconsistent with what she told you then?
No.
Well, she didn't indicate to you that she forgot any part of the night, right?
Right, she just didn't say that, so.
Would it affect your evaluation of what she told you about the events of February 23rd, 2020, if she hypothetically has testified that she did not remember 10 minutes before the videos?
Not really, no, because the event and the course of events that she narrated to me occurred over several hours. So when you interview somebody about circumstances of an offense, it's the usual for someone to not remember every single minute for hours at a time. I can't imagine that anybody's memory could hold that much unless they have like photographic memory.
Okay, not every single thing, but Sarah would conveniently just not remember certain things.
Something.
I'm not asking about hours and hours of, itemization of her day's events. We're talking about the 20 minutes of the offense. Does that affect the weight that you give her history she provided you? Just yes or no?
No.
Now, what she indicated to you was the day had been going well. It was fun and games, correct?
Yes.
Conflict-free?
To her, she said it was a good day. So That's what she told me.
But remember when she testified in the stand and she said, no, George was angry. And then he was like, wait, I thought you said things were fine, fun and games, puzzles.
It was a good day.
Yes.
You all remember that, right? When Sarah Boone, when Mr. J was trying to push her on something, and then she's like, well, George was angry earlier in the day or something. And he's like, what? When have you ever said that? You've never said that before. What are you talking about?
And there comes a point in time where the activities turn toward hide and seek, correct?
Yes.
And she goes up to the shower?
Right.
And when she comes down from the shower, that's when Mr. Torres is in this suitcase, correct?
Getting into it.
And she goes over to the suitcase and zips it, correct?
Yes.
And did she describe whether it was 100% zipped to you or just a certain percentage?
She said that it wasn't zipped all the way.
And still, then, that was funny to the two of them at first, correct?
That's right.
And then there came a point in time where Mr. Torres was getting mad about being zipped in the suitcase.
She told me that he was getting mad. Yes.
And that, in turn, made her mad.
That's right.
What Mr. Torres was saying. Okay. And still, then, that was funny to the two of them at first, correct?
That's right.
Supposedly.
And then there came a point in time where Mr. Torres was getting mad about being zipped in the suitcase.
She told me that he was getting mad. Yes.
And that, in turn, made her mad.
That's right.
What Mr. Torres was saying was, I can't breathe, correct?
That is what's recorded on a video.
Well, I'm asking you about what you reported her saying.
Well, what made her mad was not that he was saying he couldn't breathe. It's what he was saying.
Oh, hold on a second. You know what it is? I think Sarah Boone told a different version of stories to other people because she couldn't keep it straight. It was supposed to be the triggering event was when George said he couldn't breathe. It triggered her into remembering all the times that he strangled her. And that's what triggered her. Oh, God. I just feel like she told different versions. And then people were just like even with Owens, when Owens was representing what George and Sarah would happen, right? His version was different than what Sarah testified to on the stand. Oh, man. It's all over the place. I don't know if the jury's going to catch this, though, because I feel like I get the chance to rewind things, edit things, and rewatch things over and over again. So I don't know if the jury's going to catch any of this. I hope they do, please.
What you reported her saying.
Well, what made her mad was not that he was saying he couldn't breathe. It's what he was saying that was making her mad.
Well, what else was he saying?
At the time, she said that he said something that was making her mad. And so that's the extent of what we
said something, but she couldn't say what?
We talked about at that moment.
So you didn't elaborate what something was that made her mad, correct?
Right. She said,
why did you elaborate? Isn't that important?
That he said something that made her mad, and that started making her mad.
Why wouldn't you want to elaborate?
You didn't find it important to learn what specifically he said that made her mad, correct?
I don't agree that I didn't find it important.
Okay, then explain.
But you didn't elaborate.
Why wouldn't you ask that question?
Because as a person who is traumatized is describing their experience as a trained clinician, you will allow open-ended discussion of that experience. And so it's not an interrogation. You don't go asking confrontational.
Well, you didn't have to interrogate her. Just be like, oh, what did George say to you that made you mad? If you tried asking once and then she was still being evasive, then okay, sure, maybe. But
questions at the time of their first narration.
Well, you had 9 visits with her. Did you follow up on your 9th visit?
I asked her different questions about
Did you ever ask her
confrontational.
Did you ever ask her specifically in any of your 9 visits with her what it was that he said that made her mad?
No.
Why?
She never described him doing anything to make her mad, but it was words, correct?
Right.
And once she got mad, she decided that she was going to leave him in there for 2 minutes.
That's right.
Not 3, not 1, but 2, correct?
That's what she said.
And the reason she was doing that was because she wanted him to understand how it feels to be choked and what she had experienced.
That's right.
Did you ask her?
Why do we not hear this in her testimony? In her testimony, I mean, I guess because Mr. Owens was the one who was going to testify when he was asking the questions, but I feel like we didn't hear this exactly in her testimony.
Why she didn't let him out of the suitcase after 2 minutes?
Yes, I did actually ask her that.
And what did she say?
Well, she thought that he could get out himself. That's one thing. She said that when she was able to unzip it, it was not some significant thing. She was able to unzip it easily. So she said it never occurred to her that he could.
So he was getting angry. He wanted to get out. Oh, God. I need to stop trying to make sense of Sarah Boone's fucking dumbass story. I need to stop because it just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. It just doesn't make sense.
He couldn't get out.
What's that noise?
And you reviewed the still photograph of the suitcase as well as the 2 videos.
Right.
She was scared of him coming out, so scared, but she knew he could get out. But therefore, she didn't call 911 or help.
And did you understand what the...
You may proceed.
Able to unzip it easily. So she said it never occurred to her that he couldn't get out.
You may proceed.
And you reviewed the still photograph of the suitcase as well as the 2 videos.
Right.
And did you understand what the metadata or what the timestamps were for each of those items?
I'm sure when I reviewed it, I saw the timestamp. Yeah.
Would you agree that 20 minutes is 10 times as long as 2 minutes?
I would.
And if Mr. Torres had not been able to get himself out of the suitcase within 20 minutes, she didn't indicate that she let him out, correct?
She did not.
She described to you, Ms. Boone being the she, that she was helpful to the police?
Yes.
Do you agree with that assessment that she was helpful to the police?
In the sense that she was having conversations with them without counsel, I would consider that helpful to the police.
Do you think lying to the police is helpful to the police's investigation?
No.
Do you agree that she was not truthful with them?
Yes, I think that I would agree with that.
And when she described getting Mr. Torres out of the suitcase, she described stretching his little legs?
Yes.
As if he was a little child.
And she stated to you there was no fight that day, correct?
That's right.
Just wanted him to be uncomfortable.
I need to clarify. Physical fight.
Right.
Yes.
Just wanted him to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
Correct. And then...
Kind of sounds like teaching someone a lesson, something that she wouldn't say on the stand. She wouldn't say, oh, I was trying to teach him a lesson. She wouldn't concede to that. She's like, no, I just wanted him to learn and make him realize he should treat me better the next day. That's not teaching him a lesson.
There was a description of a bat and her using it to nudge, right?
Poke.
Poke. And so, do we agree that that means like poking out like this as opposed to swinging it like you're a baseball hitter?
I would agree with you.
And you reviewed the autopsy report, correct?
I believe so.
Did you get an opportunity to review the autopsy photos?
Yes.
Did you question her when she said that she only poked him with the bat?
No.
Not in any of your 9 visits?
Did I question her about whether... Can you just repeat the question? I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Yes,
okay.
Did you ever, in considering the autopsy report and the autopsy photographs that you reviewed,
Yes.
when she said that she nudged or poked with the baseball bat, did you ever question her about that, given the severity of his injuries?
So to answer correctly, I did question her about how she used the bat.
Okay.
She reiterated that she poked and she gestured what she meant. So I did question her about that.
And did you have any questions about that history she relayed to you, given the other evidence in this case that you reviewed?
Just in contrast to the interrogation video. So that...
It didn't contrast to the autopsy photographs or report?
Judge, I object.
Approach. You may proceed.
Did she indicate all this nudging or poking with the bat was done while he was inside the suitcase?
Yes.
She never told you that there was any nudging or poking with the bat when he was outside the suitcase?
Correct.
Wow. Nudging, poking. Did you not see the bruises that George had?
Indicated that she ended up flipping the suitcase over face down?
That's right.
Did she tell you about Mr. Torres calling his brother earlier that evening?
No.
Did she ever give you a history about a loud boom occurring inside of her townhouse that evening?
No.
And you never had the opportunity, obviously, to interview Mr. Torres about these things, correct?
Of course not. No.
No other questions?
All right, well, let's watch Sarah Boone leave, and let me look at... We're going to recap what happened today. So again, I will have this full live stream up. You guys can watch the entirety of the live stream. What is it, like 8 hours long? And then I will edit a video where I kind of do a shorter version of the trial and kind of get straight to the point. So I will upload that. Apologies for yesterday. Yesterday I wasn't able to upload the video. It took forever for it to go on YouTube. It took forever. It's like a 4-hour video. So I don't think that uploaded until like late night at like 3 a.m. or something like that. But hopefully today there'll be less hiccups. That'll be great. And I'll have that video out to you guys in a couple of hours. But first, before I go, let's do a recap of the Sarah Boone trial for day 4. What are your guys' thoughts on Sarah Boone trial day 4? What are our thoughts? Sam Rooney, thank you so much for the 5. Thank you for keeping me company. Sam, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thanks for being in here, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the super chat. Really, guys, thank you so much for the support. I do appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, Long Legs. Yes, Long Legs is now available for me to rent on Amazon, so I added it to my list. I've been saving up my credits, my digital credits. So for Amazon, if you choose to delay your shipping, you get Amazon credits, and then you can use it for movies and stuff like that. So I got my credits saved up so I can use it. Yeah, hit the like button for the super. Thank you so much. You think the state showed up today? Yeah, the state I think was way more awake today. Is Long Legs gory? I have no idea. Oh, Jay, thank you so much for the super chat. Oh my God, they're so cute. What is that, like lemon head? Are those fruits playing trumpets? Jay, thank you so much for the 5. I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't know if Long Legs is gory. I don't know. Does anyone in the chat know if it's gory? You don't think the defense proved anything towards the BSS defense? All right, y'all. Oh, paranormal movies? Yes, I love all the paranormal activity stuff. People say it's cheesy, but I freaking love the paranormal activity stuff. You're waiting for Smile 2? Gosh, I don't know. I had nightmares for a while with Smile 1. It was so creepy. Okay, so day 4 of the Sarah Boone trial. So yesterday, again, Sarah Boone testified on the stand. It was a very, very long day, and then we got into cross-examination. The defense is presenting their case right now. So these are the defense's witnesses. We started off with Deputy Jessica Ramirez Delgado, witness number 2, and she responded to a July 25th, 2018 incident where a male was found kicking a female. They didn't witness it, but that was what the call was for, and Sarah Boone was arrested. Sarah Boone asked why she was arrested, and it was because she fucking fought back. All right, that was with the black guy that we saw with Sarah Boone, and the black guy looked pretty fucking bad. And then we got to hear from Deputy John Alden, witness number 3, John Alden. Okay, so John Alden, again, came for a battery call. Said that George had redness on the left side of his neck. Oh, no, this is Sarah. Sarah had redness on the left side of her neck. She had an old injury in her right eye. George also had injuries in his left eye as well. And George, in this case, I think George was maybe the only one that was placed under arrest. George also refused to say what happened. And then we called back our Detective Koepsell. Detective Chelsea Koepsell came back onto the stand, and it was mostly to impeach our other witness, Abraham Moreno, the maintenance worker. Abraham Moreno claimed that Sarah Boone saw him that day, the day that law enforcement was at the apartment, that George was found in the suitcase, went up to him and said, oh my God, we were having fun playing games. We were playing hide and go seek. And then I was trying to teach him a lesson. And so they brought Detective Koepsell up here to try to impeach that statement that he apparently never said that because it was never in the interview, the recorded interview that she did with him. However, I think if Sarah Boone told Moreno that she wanted to teach George a lesson, that is on track with what she talked about on the stand, how, she wanted George to know and treat her better, essentially. She put it in the suitcase and she was hoping that the next day George would treat her better. So that sounds like to me teaching someone a fucking lesson. Even though on the stand, she wouldn't concede to that. She wouldn't say that she was going to teach him a lesson. But when she described the action to Mr. J, it sounded like someone that wanted to teach someone a lesson, but she just didn't want to admit it on the stand. Johnny Lambert, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that. Thank you. And then another important testimony that came through Detective Koepsell was that apparently Abraham Moreno said that Sarah Boone had told him a couple days ago, her and George got into a fight. She was grabbed by the hair and then he took her down the stairs. So remember when she tried to say that, those 2 neighbors that heard the huge fighting and then the loud banging noise? Well, that wasn't from the night when George and I were drinking and he was in the suitcase. That was from the night before. They are not remembering it correctly. But it's like, could it really follow Sarah Boone? Could it really follow her? Could we really trust in her memory? It seems like her memory is only conveniently remembered, if it's convenient for her, or if it serves to answer some inconsistencies. So it seems like, either she just happened to just remember this, forgot about it, or she has good memory all of a sudden. I don't know. But I'm going to still believe the neighbors over her. Now, I think it's possible that she may have told Abraham this, although I think it's weird that she only told Abraham this at the scene while she told everyone else that they were having a good time that day. I think it's weird that she told Abraham this. So I don't know if she really told him that, or maybe he misremembered correctly, or maybe he's telling the truth, right? Maybe he's telling the truth because he was interviewed pretty quickly. However, it's possible that she saw this, was like, oh my God, I forgot that I told Abraham that George grabbed me by the hair and pulled me down the staircase. You know what? Maybe I'll use this and I'll try to fit it in a narrative to explain the whole staircase, loud banging, crashing noise thing. So that's why I was wondering, when did she come up with the staircase incident? Was it after, when she was pro se, or when she had access to these documents and then she heard what the neighbors said about her, and then she, after the fact, retrofit her story to explain the staircase loud banging noise? Or did it actually happen? We'll let the jury decide. Next, we have Dr. Michael Brannon, and I think Dr. Michael Brannon, I think he did really well on the stand. He is an expert, talked about battered spouse syndrome. And essentially, he just talks about how battered spouse women, they respond very differently. Men can as well. And that their reaction or their strategy developed by the abuse. Oh, he talked about the reactions. And basically, when you're someone who's a battered spouse, you might react differently in a situation than people who have not seen themselves in violent situations. So he basically just talked about the generalizations of a battered spouse. He didn't apply it to Sarah Boone directly, though, because he never, it seems like he didn't evaluate Sarah Boone. That's my understanding, that he didn't evaluate Sarah Boone. But there are some traits that he would talk about where it seems like, it seems to also fit George as well and Sarah Boone. So he talked about coercive control with the social interactions, basically Sarah Boone having control of George's phone, right? Some of us saw that like, okay, Sarah Boone was also maybe being having coercive control over George as well. Jay, oh my gosh, thank you, Jay. Thank you so much for joining the membership. Welcome. Thanks for joining the membership. Welcome. Enjoy your emotes, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. Yay, we got another member. Thank you. Oh, wait, I forgot. I had to do. So back to the coercive control. So when he was talking about coercive control, I was like, you know what? Coercive control could actually apply for Sarah Boone, because Sarah Boone seems like she oversaw what George did, all of his activities and stuff like that. So again, like a broken record, I'm going to repeat this again. It seems like Sarah controlled what George did as if he was a child. Hey, George, today we want to make sure you have a sense of accomplishment so you feel good about yourself today. So I want to make sure we get to do some of the cleaning, the laundry, the chores. Let's do all the chores first, and then we can reward ourselves by getting drunk at 12 o'clock with a giant bottle of wine, okay? And then it was also George not having a cell phone. Now, some of you guys might believe that he didn't have a cell phone because he didn't afford one. He just didn't have a cell phone. Or did Sarah try to control by saying that, like, hey, I'm going to be the one that has a cell phone and you can use my cell phone. And that way, she could see who he calls, what he does on the phone to see if he watches the porn or not. And then also the music that George listened to. It seems like she also dictated that as well. There were certain types of music that she didn't like George blasting because she said it would be too rowdy and loud and it would make him be rowdy himself or angry. The term that she used was the music was too fractious. And then we got into the cross-examination of Dr. Brannon. Again, Dr. Brannon said everything on the stand, seemed fine. He seems very knowledgeable. But what I appreciated was that the state was able to use Dr. Brannon's knowledge on battered spouse syndrome and abuse and trauma. And it seems like he was also able to apply it in a way that went against Sarah Boone as well. So he talked about, a person. So a person who was accused of a crime, right? Could there be some credibility issues? Could they have reasons to kind of want to lie in order to have the truth be in their favor, right? That's a possible thing as well. Talked about the alcohol impairing people and how it can cause someone to be deceitful. There could be some aggression in there as well. And that whoever's evaluating the person must take everything into account and not just look at like one small slice of the picture. You have to look at it comprehensively. And then Mr. J had Dr. Brannon define narcissistic personality disorder. And so with narcissistic personality disorder, I try to take notes as much as I can, but there's definitely some that I'm missing. But he did mention that you might have a grandiose sense of self-worth. So, Sarah Boone continually, reminding people that she's a good person, great mother. She said she was a straight A student, and this was something back in high school or something. What a weird achievement to kind of like harp on when it's been like 30 years. It was like 30 years ago, like a long time ago, or 20 years ago. So consideration of self over anyone else, and you're basically having an inflated self, inflated. What am I trying to say? You have an inflated view of your own self. And that, other people should also recognize this as well if they didn't. He also mentioned that men could also be victims as well. And Mr. J was like, abusers, would they typically insult and maybe lower the value of their victims? He's like, yes. And then he got really specific with the control of birth certificates and identification papers. That's why I was like, is Mr. J going to introduce something that Sarah Boone did in the past to control someone? Because it was very specific, and I think he will. But now I'm like, is he going to call Brian Boone? Because it seems like when they talked about what they're going to do for the rest of the scheduling, Brian Boone's name wasn't brought up. So I'm like, maybe they're not going to call Brian Boone? I don't fucking know. I don't know. I'm just trying to guess, but I don't know what's going on. Okay, we don't know what's going to happen. And then also Dr. Brannon. Dr. Brannon was like, in a legal setting, someone could have the motivation to present them in a certain way. Sarah Boone testifying on the stand. And that in a divorce setting, you could also lie to make yourself look better. And so we know there's some, issues with Sarah Boone and her previous ex-husband. I mean, they're already divorced and stuff like that, but there were some issues with whether or not, like some marital, post-marital stuff with the alimony and the child support. I think she still wanted money in payment for that, even though she was being housed in a jailhouse. I don't know. That's what it seems like. Next, we got to hear from witness number 7, Pearl Walker. Where is Pearl at? Poor Pearl Walker, just the sweet old lady from the neighborhood. Sweet old lady from the neighborhood who would chat with Sarah Boone when Sarah Boone would be walking her dogs. And Miss Pearl Walker, she said she lived in the same apartment complex as Sarah. It's been 4 years. She said her husband and her would be sitting on the porch, and Sarah would be coming with the 2 dogs, and she'd be like, "Hey, Sarah, how you doing?" She mentioned that sometimes she would see some choke marks around Sarah's neck and some marks on her arms. Sarah was very nice to her, I guess, not disrespectful to her. That Sarah Boone, at one point, she did remember Sarah Boone having a black eye, and it looked like she had been choked. The interesting thing, though, was that when she was asked, so Sarah Boone, when you would see her, would you ever see her drunk? And she's like, no. And it's like, that's different what all the other neighbors said. Because all the other neighbors were like, yeah, they were always drunk as fuck, and we always avoided them, okay? It was chaos. We just avoided them. Now, she wasn't sure when she saw the injuries, as a member of the dates of it. And of course, cross-examination, it was like, oh, okay, and you don't know who could have caused those marks, right? It's like, yeah, I don't know who could have caused that. But I think the jury knows better. Jury's like, yeah, it's probably George. Probably George. Now we got to witness number 8. This one's a lengthy one, but witness number 8, Dr. Julie Harper, who is a forensic psychologist. Again, she first evaluated Sarah Boone back in June of 2020. This is when Sarah Boone had the private attorney working with her at the time. And of course, that private attorney withdrew, I think like right before her trial was supposed to start. But anyways, they decided to hire Dr. Julie Harper again because Mr. Owens was short on time. And it's like, you know what, let's just get the same person, someone who's already knows about this case, has met with Sarah Boone before. Let's get the same expert to evaluate Sarah Boone. And so she evaluated Sarah Boone, and she said that Sarah Boone is someone that has PTSD and is considered a battered spouse. Now, Owens did try to use his own witness to maybe discredit his other witness that testified when asking about the narcissistic traits. She did acknowledge that Sarah Boone does have some narcissistic traits, but she is not diagnosed as someone with narcissistic personality disorder. With the narcissistic traits, it was being described as Sarah kept telling people, she told people that she was a straight A student. In quotations, reiterate her abilities, evidence of she reiterate her abilities. It was evidence of her having low self-esteem, and coping mechanism was to identify what was it that made her stand out. And so this is what I was trying to say, that like maybe Sarah Boone liked to have George around because George was someone that she can take care of, show everyone that like, hey, look at this guy. He's having a rough life. He's not a good person, but here I am making him better. Same thing with maybe I might be overreaching here, but with the dogs as well, right? What if she had these 2 dogs that were disabled and it was because it made her look like a good person? Like, oh my God, Sarah Boone, you're such a great person. You're taking care of like disabled dogs. I don't know. I think that's a possibility. You know, it seems like Sarah Boone loved to be a teacher, loved to be someone seen as like, oh, a caretaker. You know, someone who's like, oh, look at this person, great qualities. You love to take care of people that need help or, you know, have animals that are disabled. So maybe that made her look good, and maybe that's what she used to, you know, get people to be like, oh, what a great person she is. Sorry, that was me just repeating myself over and over again. Next, we got into, she didn't think that Sarah Boone was feigning her results in any way, she said. She also believes that Sarah Boone also suffers from alcohol use disorder, which is just like another term for like alcoholism. It was recategorized in the DSM, they said. They did talk about self-defense a little bit and the February 23rd, 2020 event. So like I said, I didn't really agree with the majority of what she said, because I do agree that, yeah, I'm sure Sarah Boone does have PTSD, you know, but do I believe that she was the one who was like purely just a victim and it was just her? No, I think the PTSD, you know, probably her and George both had PTSD because they were both being awful to each other and abusing each other, and it went back and forth. She went back to talk about the February 23rd, 2020 event, and she said that Sarah did have battered spouse syndrome during the time of the event, and that pattern of behavior was ingrained within her, that she had a heightened sense of danger. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, like, sure, maybe she had BSS back then. However, I don't think that it absolves her from the murder of George in the suitcase. You know, I still think that her story is nothing but just a load of shit. When it comes to self-defense, you know, like I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine. Say you took someone and then you put them in like an empty tank and then you like chained them down, right? And all of a sudden you're slowly filling up the water, and then the person is able to get out of their chain slowly, and they're trying to crawl out of the tank because you're slowly filling them with water, and like they're weighed down and they don't want to drown. And imagine the person standing on top and like smashing their fingers and crushing them, saying, please stop doing this to me. Stop doing this to me. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you trying to get out and save yourself and not have yourself killed? It just doesn't make sense to me. It seems to me that George was trying to get the fuck out of the suitcase, because who wants to be in a suitcase for a long time, especially when things are getting really aggressive with your partner? He was trying to get out of the suitcase. He probably knew that maybe to him, his life was in danger and that he didn't want to suffocate, you know, like, and then she's too busy poking him saying, oh, don't do this to me. You know, why are you doing this to me? Stop that, stop that. It's like, dude, he's trying to fucking get out because he didn't want to fucking die. I don't know. Really fucking crazy. I don't buy the self-defense thing, but I don't know. Hopefully the jury knows better. We'll see what the jury believes. Yeah, and he's the one who had all the bruises and stuff like that, you know, in comparison to Sarah Boone. What does she have, right? She had the one bruise on her hand from doing the thing with the baseball bat. But she says that Sarah Boone used words as weapons, and she also used weapons as weapons. And that when Sarah Boone becomes stressed, anxiety, she becomes really short in tone. I'm like, okay, all right, sure. Now, in cross-examination, I do think Mr. J did pretty good with cross-examination. Mr. J was trying to say that, you know, what about two people being in a relationship that's like really abusive? Maybe to them, that's not PTSD. And she's like, yeah, that's right, you know. Again, agreeing that men could also be subjected to trauma. So Mr. J, again, trying to introduce that it could also be George who's the victim in this relationship, or maybe the both of them. I was like, well, I wonder if she ever talked to Sarah but determined whether or not Sarah had PTSD after killing George. Did she have PTSD? Did it affect her in any way from killing George? But I don't think they got into that. Again, Mr. J reiterate that if someone said something like, I'm the best thing that will ever happen to you, is that considered like, you know, some sort of abuse? And she's like, yes. Or if you're withholding their identification papers or birth certificate or other belongings, and she's like, yes. Or using the legal process to threaten someone, and says yes. Now, something new that we heard today was something about the first date. Apparently, this wasn't testified on the stand by Sarah Boone, but apparently, during the first date, Sarah Boone claimed with George, first date with George, and again, this is different than what she testified to yesterday, but Sarah Boone told Dr. Harper that during the first date with George, George smashed her phone, was hitting her for the first time. She's never been hit before. Made her crouch on the porch in fetal, and then her back was hurting, threatened to sodomize her, bruise her up, and this was the first time she met him. To me, it just doesn't really make sense in those stories. It's like, I don't know, super fucking special and crazy or something like that. But usually there's like a honeymoon period with people who are abusers. But I don't know. I was like very confused if I just didn't hear it correctly. But it seems like that is what Mr. J said. And that seems like that is what Dr. Julie Harper agreed to, what Sarah said happened on the first date. I don't know. Again, Sarah Boone wanted George to be a better person, a better husband, a better ex-husband, would make George call his family members, make them send money. Seems like Sarah Boone was getting $1,000 a month in alimony, and I think additionally $1,000 a month in child support. The way that Mr. J said that seems like she was getting it separately, but that seems like a fuck ton of money. $2,000 a month. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Brian Boone has a pretty decent job, because $2,000 a month is support. Like, oof, that's a lot. They talked about, let's see, George possibly, I don't know if this happened, George driving her in the car. Oh, there were some of these past incidents, but the questionings were kind of all over the place. Apparently in January 2018, Sarah Boone came in looking for a pastor, and she was really sad that her husband and kid were out of town. So I think these were times when Sarah Boone was, I guess, forced to, maybe she was having some like mental health thing. They were forcing to commit her. Like I said, the questioning around this was a little bit hazy for me. I was trying to follow it. It was a little all over the place. But January 2018, apparently she came in looking for a pastor. She mentioned that she was like depressed because her husband and kid were out of town, and she had just lost her job. I'm like, oh, what job is this? Now the state was trying to say, well, George wasn't mentioned here whatsoever, right? She's like, no, George wasn't mentioned. But it took her a while to say that, I feel like. There was another thing in October 2018 when she was trying to go to a hospital to see a counselor, but no information about that. Oh, the funny thing that, the interesting thing that Dr. Harper said was that Sarah Boone was not aware that she was inconveniencing others. I'm like, are you sure she wasn't aware that she was inconveniencing others, or did she just not give a fuck because she placed herself above other people? Her wants and needs mattered way more than other people. She didn't care about other people or their schedule. And it seems like that's how she treated Brian Boone. It was like, okay, well, maybe I'll pick up, my son today. Maybe I won't. And then Brian Boone always was the backup to take care of everything and to take care of Sarah Boone when shit would go down, right? Talked about sense of entitlement. I don't know if she thought that Sarah Boone had a sense of entitlement. Maybe, possibly. Now, in terms of who did Dr. Julie Harper interview that was close to Sarah Boone, she interviewed Melissa Sexton, which I believe is a property manager, but did not interview Brian Boone. Brian Boone is a huge component of her life. I don't know why Brian Boone wasn't interviewed. And Brian Boone is the most intimate person in Sarah Boone's life, aside from George, who is deceased, right? Why not interview Brian Boone to get more, I don't know, just more background history? Sarah Boone apparently did not describe herself as being intoxicated that night of the suitcase. Apparently did not remember taking the suitcase video. She does remember that they were doing hide and go seek, and they were doing puzzles, and things were good between the two of them. And that, oh God, this is where there's like indiscrepancies with like Sarah Boone's story. Depending on who she told, the stories are a little bit different from each other. So I think from her understanding, she was trying to say that Sarah Boone got mad because George said that he couldn't breathe. And then she remembered the times that she couldn't breathe when George would choke her out. And that is something that made her really mad. However, when Sarah Boone testified, it was a different version of that. Also different from what Mr. Owens said as well. I think Owens said that the fingers coming out was what made Sarah Boone triggered and angry or something. Fuck, I don't remember what. There's so many different stories now that I don't remember. I can't even keep track. It's so hard. When she said that, she claimed that George said something that made her mad, but Dr. Harper, for some reason, didn't ask her and elaborate. Oh, what was that something that George said? Met with her 9 times, right? Never elaborate. What was it that George said that made her mad? She's like, oh, it's because when I'm doing these evaluations, it's like an open chat. I don't want to interrogate them. It's like, yeah, but wouldn't you want to ask, like, oh, okay, like, don't interrogate them, obviously. But at the same time, be like, oh, what was that? You know, what made you mad, Sarah? Like, what happened? Like, what did George say that made you mad? Instead of letting Sarah just go on and talk and yap. I don't know. Let's see. Sarah Boone apparently was planning on leaving him the suitcase for 2 minutes, which we know is complete bullshit because he was in there for, what, more than 10 hours? Not for 2 minutes. She didn't ask why. Oh, she did ask why Sarah didn't help to get him out. And apparently Sarah Boone says it never occurred that he couldn't get out. Never occurred that he couldn't get out. Sam's Rock Collection. Hello. Thank you so much for the $9.99. The 99. Thank you. Thank you so much for the 99. I appreciate that. Thank you. Can they give her max? I mean, my understanding is that she's looking at 22 minimum and then like max life, unless something has changed. But I don't know if they're going to include lesser, if they're going to have lesser included. I don't know. All right. She mentioned that there was no fighting that day. She wanted him to be uncomfortable, that they were poking and nudging. But again, you saw the injuries on George. There was not poking and nudging. It seems like the bruises were really bad. And if you didn't see the injuries, the descriptions of the forensic pathologist said that there was some deep bruisings on George. There definitely was one aggressor that night. And then they got into the no contact order. This is after a break. So the defense wanted to include some no contact order from June 2019. There were 2 of them. So basically a no contact order for George. He couldn't contact Sarah. And we got into some scheduling stuff. It seems like the defense, they are possibly going to rest tomorrow morning. And state says Dr. Warner is the one that evaluated Sarah Boone. And I'm guessing, she'll have some very interesting things to say about Sarah Boone and what her thoughts are. I think they said that might take about an hour for direct and cross-examination. And then there's going to be a 2-hour video body cam footage, some text messages that they're going to read into record. And I don't know, no mention of Brian Boone, no mention of the property manager testifying. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to happen. And then the state will be completely done. And then hopefully closing arguments Friday morning. And then we'll be done. Well, not done, but closing arguments Friday morning, and they'll give the jury instructions, and then the jury will go and they will deliberate. Now, I wonder if they're going to deliberate and decide to come back Monday morning and continue deliberations, or if they were, given instructions to deliberate, let's say afternoon. Are they going to take a couple hours and then come back with a verdict, or are they going to come back next week? But I think a lot of them were expecting for this trial to be a lot longer. I mean, this trial is like, 1 week long if you just include opening statements to closing statements? No way she could wrestle him into that little thing, says Hairdo. I don't know. I think she hit him with a baseball bat. The judge can, let's see. I think 40 is on the table. I don't think 40 is on the table. 22 max, 22 minimum. Yeah, I heard 22 minimum. That's all I heard. 22 minimum. I think that to call Brian, I think maybe, so I thought they were able to use Brian Boone and say that like, hey, you claim to be in an abusive relationship. What is it true that you're also abusive as well? But I guess they're not able to get Brian Boone and his version of the abuse because I think that's something that's maybe too prejudicial to Sarah Boone. And so I don't think that door was open. So Brian Boone can't talk about what he went through when he was with Sarah Boone. That's my understanding of it. Because I was like, oh, now that, battered spouse syndrome is in, they can call Brian Boone. But I was like, oh, maybe not actually. Maybe they can't call Brian Boone and ask about his history with Sarah Boone. So that might be why we haven't asked Brian Boone about his relationship with Sarah Boone yet. And how, she would also attack him. But that's it for the scheduling, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, the defense said they're going to rest. So I will see you guys.